So welcome to another episode of Cheers to Careers. I'm fortunate today to be joined by Carmen Branch, Vice President of Corporate Communications at Comerica Bank in Dallas. Welcome, Carmen. How are you?
Good. How are you, Steve?
Doing all right. So what is your primary role with Comerica Bank?
So I actually, I'm on the external communications team. I'm one of three external communications managers, and I cover the Texas, Arizona, and Florida markets. So I provide support to our market presidents. We have a we have a couple presidents in Texas, and then we have one in Florida and one in Arizona. So I provide anywhere from public relations to media relations support for them. I prepare remarks, and then also I help stage our community outreach in those particular markets.
So looks like you might be in your home office today. What's been the last 20 months? What have they been like for you?
Well, it's been, it's kind of been up and down. We went home on St. Patrick's Day of 2020. Ironically enough, we actually do a sponsorship for the St. Patrick's Day Parade here in Dallas, which is a pretty big event. So that obviously got called, and I have not returned back full time yet, but it is a voluntary for my phase with marketing and communications starting on October 12th. So I've been working in my home office since then. It's been amazing, some of the things that we've been able to pull off. Most recently, I did a mobile bank bus launch in Naples, Florida from here. So we made it work, and I think as communicators, we're very versatile, and we just know how to execute and get the job done. So, but I also am cutting out on my commute time as well. I commute about 45 minutes to an hour each day, each way, actually not each day, each way to work to downtown Dallas. So I feel like I've gotten a lot more work done in the times when I'd be sitting in traffic.
So how big is your communications team? Has that been a challenge to kind of communicate with them logistically?
So on our corporate communications team, we have an internal and external team. And on the external team, there's three of us. And it includes another Jayhawk, actually, that went to KU and was in the J school a couple years behind me. And then and he covers more of our national communications, and then also our California market. And then we also have a counterpart and our colleague in Michigan. And Michigan is our largest market just because that's where we were founded. So I think we've stayed pretty close as a team. And because Lewis and I are the only ones that sit in Dallas, we were used to working remotely with our other team members. The internal team is pretty much here, and I partner with them a lot. So I think that, your kind of communications, you can make things happen from anywhere. So it really hasn't been as difficult. Of course, we miss the camaraderie. However, we do a lot of IMs all day long and emails normally, even if we're in the same place. So we really haven't seen that much of a shift, other than not being able to host our events, which that's a big part of my job, and trying to find other things to, kind of convert to virtual platform.
I know when you graduated from KU, wow, hard to believe, 20 years ago, I believe.
Yes.
I know you started with the sports communications backgrounds. I mean, what were kind of your career aspirations when you graduated from KU?
I would say I thought I was in line to be an athletics director, or ultimately maybe a commissioner one day of a conference, an athletic conference. But back then it was real unusual. I shouldn't say it was not unheard of, but a lot of people that went into sports information or PR, their track did not lead specifically to being an athletics director. But as I stayed in the field and transitioned to the Big 12, I started to see more and more of some of my colleagues that I started working with kind of transition into those ranks. So that was very encouraging. So I thought, okay, I guess I can do this, and so that was something that was very encouraging as I went on to kind of still try to pursue something in that area. But I always had a passion for community, whether it was athletes working and doing community relations, or just kind of getting to know sports professionals outside of what they do on the court. I always like to focus on what they did off the court and what made them the person they are, he or she are today, or what they were today. And so that was one of the big things that I like to focus on, and that's kind of where I kind of was able to journey throughout my career and kind of carry that communications piece. I mean, not communications, my apologies, but community piece in each aspect of my career.
And speaking of your career, I know, like you said, you started out with like KU Media Relations, Big 12, then I believe March of Dimes before Comerica. Can you kind of walk us through some of the steps you made and like how you knew like it was time to kind of move on?
Yes, so it was nice because as a student at KU, because I did work in the media relations office, I had the opportunity to work the Big 12 tournaments as a student over spring break. I didn't go on spring breaks. My spring breaks were March Madness, as you saw me when you were a reporter. And then as I moved on to the Big 12, I got offered the internship there because my soon-to-be colleagues there, witnessed me work, when I was working the basketball tournament, and even if it was the football championship when it came to Kansas City. And so they were kind enough to make an offer for me to come here 20 years ago when I graduated. Then I thought I was going to head back to the Kansas area, although my parents and my brother younger brother had moved to Texas, because it's like, well, I'll probably just go back to, the Midwest. But then fortunately there was a position open on the Big 12 staff. And so the commissioner at the time, Kevin Weiberg, offered that to me. He was a fellow Kansan. He did go to K-State, but I guess he saw something in me and and he had a SID background as well. And so he offered that to me. And then I did something I had never done before, which seems archaic now, but I had never managed a website before, but that's what was part of the position. So I kind of learned how to work with I guess it would be a web management company back then to help recreate our website. And then I was able to broaden that skill set. And then I transitioned to, I've worked with a plethora of sports. So I was always open-minded about kind of, building my resume and not limiting myself just to like only the sports I knew or just the discipline or what I learned at KU. But obviously, then I transitioned to, I was kind of getting a little bit, I wanted more from the sports background. And so I kind of started thinking, okay, I am so passionate about serving the community. How can I tie both of those together, or how can I transition from working in athletics? Because I think sometimes people feel like that's the only thing they can do. But fortunately, I had a journalism degree, so it wasn't just a sports focus. Right. So ironically enough, someone that I worked with at the Big 12 had another counterpart that he worked with at the Southwest Conference. So it was another sports connection, but she had transitioned into working at March of Dimes and nonprofit. And I also had a former colleague that I worked with at KU. She had also worked for the Kansas City March of Dimes. So it was kind of cool that we had a similar path. And so I got hired as the DFW communications director, and then ultimately ended up as the regional communications director, which also covered Kansas City. So that was kind of cool to go back to my roots. And then lastly, so working at a nonprofit, you have corporate relationships, of course, for donors. And that's how I met, she's now the chief credit officer at Comerica, but she was our board chair. And I worked with her a lot, and they had an opening. And so her and the other VP of corporate communications thought of me for a position. So then that's how I transitioned over to Comerica. And that's where I'm at today.
Great. And I'm sure over the years, I know you worked with some talented teams, and I think a lot of students I talk to, they're so focused on salary. But talk about the importance of working with, surrounding yourself with good people. I mean, I think sometimes that's overlooked in career development.
Yeah, I think one of the preconceived notions is like just network. But the key to networking is also building relationships, and they have to be authentic and genuine. If I hadn't made those relationships, if I hadn't built those relationships, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to have any of the positions I had, because that's pretty much how I've been fortunate to advance in my career, is through the relationships that I've built. And you also have to know, I have this skill set, but it's a combination too. So I think it goes hand in hand. And you don't want to burn any bridges. You just want to always put your best foot forward. And I volunteered for a lot of things, like working over, March Madness. That's not the ideal, but to a lot of people that is a dream, because they get to watch, if they love basketball or they love football, and they can work a Big 12 football championship. And the cool thing about that is I kind of got to reciprocate that at the Big 12, because I managed all the student volunteers for the larger events. And then also was the baseball and softball media relations contact at some point too. So it was funny being on the other side, because some of the kids would be like, oh, I don't want to do this, and you don't get paid to do this, and just it was a lot of expectations. And then they saw, it was kind of good to see where the ones who actually were willing to sacrifice just a few days of their spring break to see where they're at today has been very rewarding. And just to know that I played like a small, part in that, and just letting them know there's so many opportunities out there.
And Carmen, you talked about the importance of building relationships, and I think you touched on the skill sets. Can you talk a little bit more about those transferable skill sets you developed at the J School? That's one thing we take a lot of pride here at the J School, that you do have skills, you develop those over time, but they really seem to transcend every industry.
I think the foundation that has really separated me from amongst my peers is my writing. I've always been a writer. Ironically enough, I just met up with Dean Buchan, who hired me at KU, and he always jokes around and laughs at me because I brought in a writing sample of my high school newspaper from Great Bend High School, Panther Tales. I was the editor. And so he said that kind of blew him away. He said, because a lot of times he did have people that wanted to come in, but they were maybe just good at stats, or they knew like who was the top player, they just had a passion, for athletes. But I always brought my writing samples with me. And then that kind of carried over to working at the Big 12, because I had to do player of the week press releases every week, and go do research on certain things and write features. And from there, and then that transcended to March of Dimes, because obviously a lot of people know in the nonprofit world, you kind of are a jack of all trades. So I did some internal communication. I did external things I'd never done before, but because I knew how to write, I just had to cater, shift audiences and figure out how to communicate to those different target audiences, to those different folks. So and then even at Comerica, I write a lot all the time. And from the J School, we did different things. Like we edited videos. We were in the business communications track, which is Stratcom now, I believe, still. And so I liked that I was able to learn. I learned how to write for reporters, which is a big part of my job, because obviously, I write PSAs for some of our community events. So it's in everything I do. Very seldom, if there's not a day that goes by that I'm not compiling talking points for a senior executive. And then it's usually just trying to figure out what their voice is after I get to know them. But I do that every single day. And I credit the KU Journalism School with really preparing me for that, because I had some really great professors. Suzanne Shaw. We even had Lori Demo. She was like a visiting professor, and she was like a former editor from the USA Today. So even though I started out and I switched over, I was still, those are just my intro classes, but I had that firm foundation.
And I know you mentioned a few names already. Are there a few people that kind of mentored you along the way that helped, put you in a great position?
Yes, I would say when I starting out, I would say Doug Vance and Dean Buchan, who worked in the SID office, and Doug just announced he's going to be retiring this summer. And then from the J School standpoint, definitely Suzanne Shaw. She was my advisor. I still talk to her, check on her, every now and again. Even when I would decide to leave and go to a different, job, I'd kind of pick her brain, and she's like, why do you want to do that? And so it just was comforting that I still had her input, and she always believed in me. I also, and I would say anybody that I worked with in the KUSID office, even Mitch Gurman, he started out as a intern when I was a student. And then by the end of and by the time I graduated, he was over the office. And then at the Big 12, I worked with Bob Berta and Bo Carter. They were great mentors. And Joni Lehman, who's still with the Big 12, like Bob. All those people along the way, and Rob Carolla, they all really helped me to really hone in on my skills and allow me to really expose my talents. And they just really believed in me. It was kind of scary sometimes how much they trusted me just to kind of do things on my own. But I bumped my head a little bit, but then it's made me, the practitioner that I am today. So I'm grateful for all those experiences.
Now, I know you talked a lot about, working with like KU Media Relations. Did you have time to do anything else while you were at KU? I mean, was it pretty much student and that, or did you involved in any other activities at KU?
I was in PRSSA. So I was active there, and I actually am still active in PRSA in Dallas. And I really do believe in that organization and the opportunities and the people I've gotten to meet, and the colleagues that I've interacted with. And I can call on them for things that, that I might want their expertise. They might know more a little bit on the corporate side about something or from an agency standpoint. And then that took up most of my time. I volunteered whenever I could. I was active with the St. Lawrence Catholic Campus Center while I was there. And I did I would work with the Black Student Union when I had the opportunity. But working in the SID office was almost like a full-time job and going to school. So that's where I spent most of my time. But, it was ironic when it was time for me to do our campaign. We of course did sports. So I was also excited, looking forward to, I'm like, yes, we're going to have a client that I've never done any, an industry I've never worked in. And then we did the Omaha Royals, but we did get an A. We got a really great grade on it. And all of my colleagues, they were like, well, this is easy for you, but it was cool because they had a lot of great ideas. So that was very impactful.
So what's the lifestyle been like making that transition from, say, Great Bend to Lawrence to Dallas? Has that been a pretty smooth transition?
Yes, so I'm originally from Chicago. So although I grew up in Great Bend, we went back to Chicago often. And so I always, in my mind, my parents raised me as a big city type girl. And then ironically enough, my older brother and sister, they were in high school when we moved. My brother loved it because he was a basketball player, so he could be the star, as opposed to, in Chicago, there's so many great players. And then my sister was kind of like, this is okay, but I'm going from Chicago to this little bitty town. But for me, it was funny because I always knew I wanted to go to KU. I mean, it just early on, I knew that we had such a great journalism school and I liked the area. And so I went to school. At the time, a lot of my classmates did not. Most of them went to K-State because we lived closer to K-State. But I also have kind of an unusual background because I grew up on a college campus. My dad worked at Barton County Community College and he was over the dorms there. And so my house was on campus. So I already had been around campus life a lot. So my goal was like, I kind of had certain expectations and kind of already knew like what was like living in the dorms and things like that. So I was pretty focused. So once I got to KU, I, did what I had to do. And I could have graduated a semester early, but I was just like, no, I'm just going to enjoy this. I'll just take my, campaigns class first semester so I can enjoy my last semester here. And then like literally I moved to Dallas a month later. My dad was working at UT at the time, so I stayed in Austin for a year, and then I've never left. I really like Dallas. I think this is the only place I would live in Texas. But it was very smooth for me. Just like I said, some of the relationships I built over the years, I already had some, good contacts here when I came. I already knew the Big 12 staff, so they made it very smooth for me as well, and were very hospitable and make sure they took care of me. And so it was pretty smooth for me. I can't complain.
Well, it's hard to believe. I think we're 6 months away from commencement in May. What advice would you have to the class of 2022? I know they've been through some challenging times the last 20 months. I mean, if you were like a commencement speaker, what advice would you have to the journalism class of 22?
I would say keep an open mind. You might not have your dream job right out of college, but everything is a stepping stone to where you want to be. I think that this class and just this generation, hate to sound old, but they are so awesome because they can create their own opportunities, yet also fit into the box of if they want to do work at an agency or corporate communications. But with the emergence of social media and all this digital platforms, some of them already probably have their own hustle right now. And so I would just use all the skills that they've done formally and informally when they apply to jobs, because those are huge assets. Because I mean, try to take advantage of any opportunities to do an internship this second semester, because that's going to kind of get your foot in the door and also introduce you to some great people that can help open some doors for you. So I would tell them to continue building relationships because they are so key. I mean, like I said, they're invaluable, and then also keep working on their skills as much as possible. But yeah, just keep an open mind, like where you start. I mean, I didn't go to work at an agency. I know there used to be a 1+1=2, and then you're going to get to corporate, but I skipped some levels. So you're going to end up where you're supposed to be if you just work hard and continue to build relationships over the years.
Great. Yeah, great advice, Carmen. Again, I appreciate your time for joining us. I don't know if you have a KU mug close by. I always like to give a cheers.
Awesome. Cheers.
So again, cheers to
Carmen's
cheers to Carmen's career. Again, we appreciate your time and I hope all is well in Dallas.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks, Carmen.